The millionaire rescues the abandoned orphan girl on the highway and reveals a shocking secret. Richard Hart never expected his luxury black SUV to come to a sudden halt on a lonely stretch of highway. The night was thick, with fog rolling in like a ghost, swallowing the road behind him. Just as he reached for his phone, headlights flickered ahead. A small figure, barely more than a child, standing in the middle of nowhere. At first, Richard thought he was seeing things. Who would be out here, miles from any town, shivering under a threadbare blanket? Then he slammed the brakes. His heart pounded hard, chest tight like his ribs were squeezing each other. Emma. That's what he learned her name was later. But this moment, the shock of seeing her alone, the fear in her wide eyes, etched itself in Richard's mind like fire. She looked lost, not just in place, but in life. Dirt smeared across her cheeks, tangled hair hanging in clumps. Her trembling hand. Richard's first impulse was to reach out, to pull her from the dark, the cold, and the silence she'd been stuck in. He opened the door and the cold night air rushed in, wiping away the polished calm he wore like armor. Emma climbed in without hesitation. As the engine roared back to life, Richard dared a glance at the girl whose eyes held stories darker than the night outside. But the mystery only deepened. Back at his sprawling estate, where cold marble met glinting steel, Emma seemed oddly out of place, yet something about her stirred something buried deep in Richard. His usual wall of business calls, contracts, and investor meetings faded into the background. The rough edges of his heart, hardened by years of ruthless deals and solitude, began to soften. Then came the bombshell. Richard found an old, yellowed letter hidden in a forgotten safe. A letter that revealed the cruel truth. Emma was the granddaughter of a woman he had destroyed years ago in a ruthless business takeover. How could he protect her when the ghosts of his past had resurfaced with such brutal clarity? Before he could figure it out, word of the secret leaked. A rival, someone who'd been itching to take Richard down for years, saw their chance. With venom and calculation, this enemy aimed to twist the story, to trash Richard's name, and claim back what was lost. The lines between ally and adversary blurred, as tension snapped tighter around Richard like a noose. The faint hope blossoming between him and Emma seemed fragile, threatening to break. Old letters, cryptic and incomplete, whispered of truths that could shatter Emma's newfound sense of safety. And just when Richard felt ready to stand up and fight for both their futures, a chilling discovery turned everything upside down. What secrets still lurked in the shadows? And how far would Richard go to protect the girl who had already changed his life forever? Hey, before you continue with this incredible story, I have an important warn. Oh, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love meeting all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes a difference. Let's interact. Just when Richard thought he could finally breathe, everything shifted. The air in the room felt heavy, filled with unspoken words and looming shadows. He stared at Emma, sleeping so peacefully. A flicker of hope ignited in his heart, a flicker that quickly dimmed when the door to his study swung open, slamming against the wall. Richard! It was Lisa, his attorney and closest confidant, but her eyes were wide with panic. What is it? His voice came out sharper than intended, Anxiety gnawed at his insides. Your rival, he's cornered you. A leak. There's a video. Richard's heart sank. What do you mean a video? Of you and Emma, together on the highway. Someone saw you take her in. But that's not all. She hesitated, biting her lip like she was holding back a storm. They found out about the letter. They know who Emma is. They're framing it as a scandal, like you're exploiting an orphan. No. Richard shook his head, the weight of the revelation crushing him. That can't be. Suddenly, a sharp crack filled the air. It was a gunshot. The sound reverberated through the house like a haunting echo, causing Richard to jump to his feet. Emma stirred, eyes fluttering open, confusion washing over her face. "Stay here," he yelled, rushing towards the door, panic and adrenaline surging through him. His mind raced. He knew this couldn't be coincidence. This was war. Then he caught a glimpse of movement outside a window. Flickering lights danced through the fog. A small crowd was gathering. Flashbulbs popped, illuminating the night. It was a media frenzy. Reporters, cameras. Everyone was here for the scandal. Richard's breaths came in quick gasps, but he had no time to waste. He raced toward the front of the house, his heart pounding. The last thing he saw before stepping outside was Emma's innocent face, staring wide-eyed, terrified. "I need to distract them," he muttered to himself, forcing his feet to carry him forward. He had no plan, but he couldn't let them near her. As he stepped outside, all the shouting and chaos just intensified. The crowd pressed close, a sea of shouting voices and flashing lights. "Is it true about the orphan? Richard, is she your daughter? What does Emma know?" He felt the press of their questions, like hands pushing against his chest. Then he spotted a figure at the back of the group. A familiar face. It was Gregory, his old business partner turned enemy. The man had a sinister smirk plastered across his face, a predator reveling in the hunt. But then, everything unraveled. From the midst of the crowd, someone shouted a name. Emma Hart. Richard's stomach dropped. How did they know her last name? Who the hell told them? His mind screamed, but there was no time to think. The crowd surged forward, and Richard felt the air close in. Then Emma stepped out from behind him. Her small hand reached for his, eyes wide with confusion. "Why are they saying my name?" Richard's heart stopped. "Emma, listen to me. You need to—" But before he could finish, a voice cut through the frenzy like a knife. "I know who she really is." All heads turned. A woman was pushing her way through, wild-eyed and frantic. Richard's breath caught in his throat as recognition hit him like a wave. It was Sophie, Emma's mother, the woman he thought dead. "What are you doing here?" Richard barked, his voice trembling. Sophie stared right at him, fury burning in her eyes. "You think you can take her from me, Richard?" "Not this time." The crowd gasped, realizing the shocking truth unraveling before them. Emma was not just a simple orphan. She was a girl with a past, tangled in a web of betrayal and secrets. Richard stood frozen, reality crashing around him. Emma was not merely the escape from the cold world he had built, but now she could be the key to his undoing. What did it all mean? What secrets lay ahead? And just how deep did the betrayals run? Richard stood frozen, the weight of Sophie's fierce eyes pinning him in place. The crowd buzzed with frantic energy, every whispered word wrapped around him like a tightening noose. Emma, still clutching his hand, seemed oblivious to the unfolding chaos. "Don't do this, Sophie," Richard pleaded, his voice trembling. "You can't just show up and claim her after all this time." "Claim her? You think I just want to take her from you?" Sophie spat, her voice sharp, cutting through the hostility. "I came to save her from you." His heart raced as a part of him wanted to scream back. How could she think he was a danger to her child? But the murmurs were growing louder, the crowd alive with the thrill of a scandal. "What did you mean by not this time?" he demanded. "What are you talking about?" "Don't you remember? I was afraid you'd ruin us, Richard." Sophie's voice cracked, filled with emotion. "You were the one who destroyed my life. And now, you want my daughter too?" Richard felt the ground shift beneath him. What had he done? How could his past come crashing back with such fury? The letter that revealed Emma's lineage suddenly felt like a curse. But he wouldn't let Sophie's chaos destroy his bond with Emma. He needed to shield Emma. That was his sole focus. "I'm here for her," Richard replied, the calmness in his tone belying the storm inside. "Not to hurt her like you did." Her expression shifted. Fear replaced fury. Confusion washed over her features as she stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "You think taking her is the answer? You have no idea how dangerous this situation is." Before he could respond, the crowd erupted. A flash ignited in the background, and in an instant, a loud crash sounded. Richard turned to see a figure emerge from the shadows, a man cloaked in darkness, wielding something glinting in the night. "Let her go!" the stranger bellowed, his voice echoing through the chaos. The crowd gasped collectively, a sharp intake of breath rippling across the mob. Richard's instincts kicked in. "Emma, run!" But she didn't move. She only stood there, eyes locked on the stranger. In that split second, a shot rang out, and everything froze. A blinding flash illuminated the night as another shot echoed. Richard's heart dropped as he felt a searing pain in his side. Blood soaked through his shirt, warmth flooding his senses. "Richard!" Emma cried, panic lacing her voice. He stumbled, falling to one knee. Sophie rushed forward, reaching for Emma as another shot was fired. But this time, it wasn't aimed at Richard. It struck Sophie, knocking her to the ground. Time slowed. Richard could barely breathe, eyes darting from Emma to Sophie. The once gray world now painted in shades of horror. He blinked, disbelieving. Sophie lay still, the life draining from her face, while Emma screamed, crumpling beside her. Only then did Richard realize the shocking truth. The mysterious man wasn't a random attacker. He was meant to eliminate Sophie, and in his twisted game, Richard had been caught in the crossfire. Glimmers of understanding crashed into his mind. He had no time to process what this meant. Emma was at the get to safety, but Emma had already lost everything. Her world shattered around her. Who were the real enemies? What twisted plot had he unknowingly stepped into? As darkness began to take over Richard's vision, one last thought flashed through his mind. This was just the beginning. Forces were at play that he had yet to understand. How deep did this conspiracy run? And what would Emma's future look like when the dust finally settled? Richard's vision blurred. The weight of everything suffocating him. The world spun around him. The shouts, the chaos, the piercing sound of another gunshot that ricocheted off the walls of his crumbling refuge. Emma's scream echoed, a haunting sound cutting through the fog of confusion. But just as he felt himself sinking into the abyss of despair, something else happened. A sudden rush of wind swept past him, thick with urgency. The dark figure looming at the edge of the crowd shifted, eyes narrowing as if focused on something or someone just beyond Richard's reach. "Get down!" a voice barked, cutting through the panic. Before he could process the command, a massive figure dove into the chaos, tackling the shadowy attacker to the ground. The crowd gasped collectively as the scene unfolded, all eyes shifting from Richard to this unexpected savior. It was Thomas. His longtime friend and former soldier had rushed in like a storm, his movements fluid, trained. Richard's heart swelled with gratitude, but that feeling was quickly replaced by confusion as he noticed the way Thomas fought, like he knew more than he let on. The two men struggled on the ground, fists flying. Richard tried to steady himself, but blood continued to seep from his wound. He saw Emma still crouching near Sophie, her small frame trembling. "Stay back!" he shouted hoarsely, a desperate plea that only added to his rising fear. But the crowd erupted into a murmuring frenzy as people snapped pictures, their eyes glued to the chaos unfolding before them. But Richard's gaze remained fixed. Who was this assailant? Then it hit him. This wasn't just a random act of violence. There was something personal at stake here. As the attacker's hood slipped back, revealing a familiar face. Gregory, Richard's old business partner turned rival. A chill raced through him. "You?" Richard breathed, heart pounding. "Yes, Richard. Isn't it poetic?" Gregory laughed, bloodied but defiant. "You thought you could erase me, but here I am, and I'm just getting started." Before Richard could confront him further, more chaos erupted. From the back of the crowd, another shadow emerged. Sophie jolted up, her eyes wide with something more than shock. "What are you doing, Gregory?" she screamed, her face pale. "You promised me!" Richard blinked, lost in the storm of revelations. Promised? What was going on? Hadn't she been the victim all this time? Why did it feel like they were all part of a filthy game he hadn't agreed to? And just as he was piecing this puzzle together, Emma screamed again, her innocent voice piercing through the air. "Mommy!" She rushed forward, pulling at Sophie, desperately seeking comfort amidst the turmoil. "Emma, no!" Richard gasped, the sight cutting deeper than the pain in his side. "Get back!" But it was too late. In a flash, Sophie turned, her expression shifting. The fear morphed into determination as she pulled something from her pocket. A gleaming object, a gun, aimed at Gregory. "You made a mistake coming after me. I don't need you anymore." Time froze. Richard's heart raced at the horrifying realization. This was more than just revenge. It was a desperate mother's fight. "Stop!" he cried, torn between protecting Emma and stopping the unfolding tragedy. But Emma didn't hear. She reached for Sophie, and in that moment, everything spiraled. "I'll do what I must to protect us," Sophie shouted, tears streaming down her face. The crowd gasped collectively again, ensnared in this web of unveiled secrets. A gunshot rang out, and in that instant, everything changed. Richard felt the shockwave of chaos wash over him. He couldn't tell if it was the wind or the sound of his heart breaking, but the world shifted irreparably. What had he truly stumbled into? Faces blurred together in a cacophony of fear, shock, and the smell of smoke. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Emma, lost in a storm of truth and betrayal. What would happen next? What terrible chain of events would unfold from this moment? And how many more secrets lurked in the shadows, waiting to be revealed? Richard felt the world teeter on the brink as the gunshot rang out. Emma cried out, her small frame quivering beside him. Sophie's hand shook, the gun clattering to the ground. A gasp rippled through the crowd, a shockwave reverberating in the night. This was chaos incarnate. But before he could act, everything shifted again. A figure broke through a side street, a flash of motion that seemed to erupt from nowhere. It was a man, broad-shouldered, with a hood low over his eyes. He pounced forward, a blur in the frenzy, his face hidden as he sprinted toward Emma. "Emma, get down!" Richard shouted, but the words barely left his lips before the man was upon them. The crowd gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. The man grabbed for Emma, pulling her away as Richard lunged, fueled by panic. But in a heart-stopping instant, everything stopped. Richard's breath caught, and his heart skipped a beat as the man yanked off his hood. "Dad?" Emma gasped, her voice trembling. It was Jason, Richard's estranged brother, thought dead for years. He stood there, out of breath, wild eyes locking onto Emma's. No one could move. The chaos that had engulfed them faded into silence. "Jason?" Richard's voice trembled, confusion swirling inside him like a tempest. His brother had been missing, rumors spinning wild tales of peril and betrayal. All these years, Richard had mourned, grieved like he had lost a piece of himself. And here he was. "What are you doing here?" I thought. Richard barely finished, each heartbeat heavy with disbelief. "I'm here to save her," Jason declared, urgency in his voice. But beneath the surface, Richard sensed something else. Fear, desperation. "You don't understand. They're coming for her." "Who?" Richard muttered, trying to piece together this fractured puzzle. But before his brother could answer, more shadows appeared at the edges of the crowd. Figures, several of them, emerging like specters cloaked in darkness. It was then Richard noticed the symbolism in their insignia, something chilling and oppressive. The same mark he'd seen on a file years ago. During the takeover that began this entire spiral, a secret organization he thought was buried, lost in the ashes of his past. "Get Emma!" Jason yelled, pushing forward as the figures advanced, eyes gleaming with malice. Sophie finally revived from her shock, scrambling to pull Emma back. "No, stay with me," she cried, but her words ricocheted off Richard. "Emma!" he shouted again, fear clawing at him. In a frantic split second, Richard realized this was no mere public scandal, no simple battle over a child. It was far deeper, a plot steeped in betrayal, vengeance, and scars of a shared past he hadn't understood. "Richard, the letter," Jason blurted, panic dripping from his words. "You need to understand. Emma's not safe with you. She was meant to be protected, not an heir to your sins." The crowd fell into a hushed silence, sprinkled with gasps, each face reflecting shock. Richard's chest tightened. "What sins? What are you talking about?" But Jason was too far gone, eyes scanning the chaos. "They'll use her against you. It's all connected. Your success, their revenge." Suddenly, fingers tightened around Richard's throat, not from the outside, but from within. The shock of a realization loosening his own grip on reality. The pies he'd taken from the past, the new life built from the wreckage. None of it was untouched. "Run!" Richard yelled, adrenaline surging, heart racing in tandem with the chaos around them. But inside, uncertainty crept. Emma looked at him, wide-eyed, trusting. What could he protect her from when every truth felt like a dagger, slowly revealing its blade? In that fragile moment, the ground beneath them trembled as the hidden threat finally broke into the open. And just like that, everything he thought he knew shattered. His enemies were closer and more intertwined with his life than he could have ever imagined. The ghosts of his past had returned. Did he still want to protect Emma? Or was he just dragging her deeper into the darkness he thought he had escaped? As the crowd surged, Richard's heart raced with an urgency he had never known. Shadows loomed large. What was truly at stake? And how far would he go, willingly or not, to unravel the web threatening to consume them both? Richard's heart thudded heavily in his chest. Chaos swirled around him like a tempest, a storm of emotions breaking loose. The shadows looming at the edge of the crowd shifted closer, and Richard's instincts screamed danger. "Get Emma!" Jason shouted, urgency tearing at his words. But just as Richard made a move to reach for her, another figure emerged from the darkness. A woman, her face concealed beneath a hood, but her presence unmistakably powerful. "Stop!" she commanded, her voice slicing through the confusion. The crowd fell silent, eyes drawn to her like moths to a flame. "Who?" Richard started, but the woman stepped forward, and with one swift motion, she pulled down her hood. Richard's blood ran cold. It was Clara, the woman Richard had wronged so many years ago. His once lover, now nothing but a ghost of his past. "You think I'd let you take her from me?" she spat, fury and heartbreak glittering in her eyes. "Clara, what are you doing here?" Richard stammered, bewildered by the onslaught of emotions. "This is my daughter, you fool!" she shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Emma. The words cut through Richard like a knife. "I've been protecting her from you, your dark past, your dangerous games." Emma's eyes darted between Richard and Clara, confusion knitting her small brow. "Mommy?" she whispered, her voice fragile, yet anchored by longing. Richard felt the ground beneath him dissolve. "No, it can't be," he murmured, disbelief clashing with the reality crashing over him. "You're not serious." But Clara wasn't listening. "You thought you could erase me? Your child from existence. You let your ambition destroy us." The bitterness in her voice wrapped tightly around him like a noose, tightening with every phrase. "I didn't know. I thought you were—" He choked on his words, each breath labored, steeped in regret. It felt like a whirlwind of memories held captive in silence, resonating with lost love and shattered trust. "But I know now, Richard," Clara continued, voice trembling but resolute. "You never wanted what was best for her. You wanted control. You were always ruthless." The crowd finished the sentence for her, murmurs rippling through them. Scandalous. The realization slammed into Richard. He could barely process it. It was true. He had let his ambition overshadow the people he loved. History repeated itself, but this time with Emma caught in the crossfire. "Shut up," Gregory shouted, trying to regain control. The man was still on the ground, catatonic, but his voice broke the heavy silence. "This is all a game, Richard. Everything you built is crumbling." Suddenly, gunfire erupted again. Two loud cracks, cutting through the chilling night. Closer this time. Richard ducked, adrenaline coursing through him as he instinctively shielded Emma. But Clara didn't retreat. She stood firm, holding her ground against both her enemies. In that terror-filled moment, another explosion of truth echoed in Richard's mind. Who was the real enemy here? Had his desire to protect Emma just placed her in greater danger? Then, out of nowhere, another figure surged through the crowd, this one wide and desperate. A police officer, radio crackling. "We have multiple shots fired. Clear the area." His shout rang through the night, urgent and demanding. Panic surged around them as chaos erupted again. Clara reached for Emma, pulling her close. Richard's heart raced. But just before the officer reached them, as people clambered to escape, a piercing scream shattered the confusion. "No, you can't take her!" Emma's scream ripped through Richard's heart, causing it to splinter. "Mommy, no!" She lunged forward, reaching for Clara. The noise melted away as Richard stood petrified, watching Clara, Jason, and Emma battling against the world crashing down around them. Who would truly claim Emma's future? Was she fated to be part of a painful legacy? And in the midst of turmoil, one final shocking truth loomed large. Emma was tied to a web more tangled than he could ever imagine. What had Richard set into motion? Would this be the end of their fragile bond, or the beginning of a battle for her soul? Richard felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. Clara had just revealed a shocking truth, and now, with Emma in danger and chaos surrounding them, he had to think fast. He glanced at Jason, who was pulling Emma close, their eyes wide with fear. Greg's sinister smirk, now a real threat, only added to the tension. "Get Emma out of here!" Richard yelled, desperation clawing at his throat. But just as they were making a move, the sound of a police siren cut through the night. Blinding lights flashed, illuminating the tension-filled scene. Richard's pulse quickened. The cavalry had arrived, but how could they help when the enemy was among them? Then, amidst the chaos, a commotion broke out at the edge of the crowd. A tall figure pushed through, shoving past the onlookers. Richard squinted, heart thrumming. It was a woman, her face obscured, but there was something familiar about the way she moved, eager, yet intense. "Stop right there!" a police officer shouted, but the woman ignored him, her eyes locked onto Richard and Emma. "Emma!" she shouted, voice slicing through the noise. "I'm here to save you!" Richard felt the ground beneath him crack open. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. But before she could respond, Gregory lunged, shouting obscenities in a panic. The crowd surged backward, gasping as chaos erupted again. The woman ignored the thrashing, fixing her gaze on Emma with a mix of desperation and determination. "Emma, you need to trust me." Richard's stomach twisted. Could he trust her? Would she put Emma in more danger? Then it hit him. The connection. She was one of Clara's old friends, someone who had been part of the same circles. "Stay away from her," Richard barked, instinctively positioning himself between Emma and the unknown woman. But a flicker of recognition crossed Clara's face. "It's Margaret. She's with me. Emma's safe with her." Richard's mind raced. Margaret? The same Margaret who had been in the news? Supposedly lost in a shipping container incident at sea years ago. He couldn't wrap his head around it. "What are you doing here?" he managed to gasp. "I can't let you take her. They're after her, Richard. All of them." Margaret's voice trembled, a passion igniting in her eyes. You don't know the truth, but I do. Shut her up, Gregory shouted, his voice rising with panic. He swiveled to aim a gun at Margaret, but just then, a flash erupted. Another figure, casually stepping out from the darkness, moving with a purpose. "Enough!" came a voice, strong and commanding. It was an agent, a federal agent. "Everyone put your hands where I can see them. This is an active investigation." Richard's breath caught. The world around them spun out of control. Was this really happening? Suddenly, amid the flash of lights and whispers of the crowd, Richard saw something that made his heart drop. A badge glinted in the harsh light as the agent moved closer. The emblem signified a special unit, one dealing with human trafficking. "What?" he murmured, the implications flooding his mind. They hadn't just come for a scandal. They were there for Emma. "Richard," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with realization. But before anyone could grasp what was happening, Margaret stepped forward again. "I can explain everything," she insisted, desperation tangible in her tone. "Emma's life is at stake, and it goes deeper than you know. It's not just about the past anymore. It's about the future." Richard shook his head, confusion overwhelming him. "What do you mean? You're scaring me. What future? What past?" "Richard, listen." Margaret's voice nearly cracked. "Emma, she's a key. They want her because of who she is. She's not just Clara's child. She's part of a bloodline, a legacy that could change everything. You have to understand." Just then, the crowd skittered backward as sirens wailed louder, and Richard's heart thudded harder. But in that revelation, everything he thought he knew began to unravel. Emma's role wasn't just one of an innocent child caught in a dangerous game. It was far more significant than he could fathom. Could it all be true? Before he could form a coherent thought, a sudden explosion rocked the ground, sending people scrambling. Chaos erupted again. Screams, worried faces. Richard felt a sharp pain in his chest, but it wasn't physical. What were the real stakes here? What had he unleashed? And as he reached for Emma, his heart pounding, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all in deeper than he could have ever imagined. What did Emma's future hold now? And would anyone survive to see it? Richard felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. Clara had just revealed a shocking truth. And now, with Emma in danger and chaos surrounding them, he had to think fast. He glanced at Jason, who was pulling Emma close, their eyes wide with fear. Greg's sinister smirk, now a real threat, only added to the tension. "Get Emma out of here," Richard yelled, desperation clawing at his throat. But just as they were making a move, the sound of a police siren cut through the night. Blinding lights flashed, illuminating the tension-filled scene. Richard's pulse quickened. The cavalry had arrived, but how could they help when the enemy was among them? Then, amidst the chaos, a commotion broke out at the edge of the crowd. A tall figure pushed through, shoving past the onlookers. Richard squinted, heart thrumming. It was a woman, her face obscured. But there was something familiar about the way she moved. Eager, yet intense. "Stop right there!" a police officer shouted. But the woman ignored him, her eyes locked onto Richard and Emma. "Emma," she shouted, voice slicing through the noise. "I'm here to save you." Richard felt the ground beneath him crack open. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. But before she could respond, Gregory lunged, shouting obscenities in a panic. The crowd surged backward, gasping, as chaos erupted again. The woman grabbed for Emma, pulling her away as Richard lunged, fueled by panic. But in a heart-stopping instant, everything stopped. Richard's breath caught, and his heart skipped a beat as the man yanked off his hood. "Dad?" Emma gasped, her voice trembling. It was Jason, Richard's estranged brother, thought dead for years. He stood there, out of breath, wild eyes locking onto Emma's. No one could move. The chaos that had engulfed them faded into silence. "Jason?" Richard's voice trembled, confusion swirling inside him like a tempest. His brother had been missing, rumors spinning wild tales of peril and betrayal. All these years, Richard had mourned, grieved like he had lost a piece of himself. And here he was. "What are you doing here?" "I thought..." Richard barely finished, each heartbeat heavy with disbelief. "I'm here to save her," Jason declared, urgency in his voice. But beneath the surface, Richard sensed something else: fear, desperation. "You don't understand. They're coming for her." "Who?" Richard muttered, trying to piece together this fractured puzzle. But before his brother could answer, more shadows appeared at the edges of the crowd. Figures, several of them, emerging like specters cloaked in darkness. Suddenly, the ground shook. A thunderous explosion erupted just beyond the crowd. People screamed and scattered as the force knocked Richard off his feet. He struggled to stand, adrenaline scrambling his thoughts. He looked around, heart racing. What had just happened? Amidst the dust and chaos, the woman's face came into focus. "You need to listen," she yelled over the growing noise, eyes frantic. "This is bigger than you think. We're running out of time." Richard's head spun as he stared at Emma, who had fallen to the ground, her tiny frame trembling. "Emma!" he shouted, scrambling to her side. But before he could reach her, Jason shouted, "The truth, Richard! You don't even know who Emma really is!" Richard froze. A cold dread seeped into his bones. "What do you mean?" "They're not just after her because of her bloodline. It's because she holds the key to a secret, one that could destroy everything." Jason's voice cracked with urgency. The world blurred. For a split second, all the sounds faded away. "A secret? What kind of secret?" Richard's thoughts raced. He had to protect her. But as Emma stood, looking lost in this whirlwind, another figure shot from the shadows, aiming straight for their little group. The crowd gasped again as the figure came crashing through, lifting a gun. Richard's blood ran cold. "Get down!" But before he could react, the figure fired. The shot rang out, loud and echoing. Time slowed as the world twisted in horror. It wasn't aimed at them. No, it struck the woman. She convulsed, crumpling to the ground with shock on her face. "Mom!" Emma screamed. Richard's heart shattered. Everything turned into a nightmare as people screamed and the police shouted, chaos spiraling out of control. But through it all, something inside Richard snapped. In that moment, he realized Emma was the center of a storm he hadn't even begun to understand. And then the woman gasped one last breath, her eyes locking onto Richard. Protect her at all costs. Her voice faded, and Richard felt the fabric of his reality tear. He turned to Jason, desperate. "What the hell is going on?" Before Jason could answer, a new voice rang out, smooth and cold. "They're all here for you, Richard. You've stirred the pot, and now it's boiling over." Richard whipped around. Standing there was a shadowy figure with an unyielding gaze. "All these years, You never learned who your true enemy was. Richard's mind raced. What did that mean? Who was the enemy, really? And just when he thought he could grasp the truth, his world turned upside down. The figure stepped closer, revealing a face Richard recognized too well. One from his past, the one he thought he'd buried forever. "Hello, brother," the figure smirked, and Richard's world crumbled once more, leaving him with the most chilling realization of all. He was not just holding a legacy, he was holding a curse that could destroy them all. Richard felt the ground tremble beneath him. "Hello, brother," the figure said again, a smirk spreading across his face like oil on water. Richard's heart raced, confusion clashing with nascent fury. "David, you're alive?" Richard's voice came out as a dry whisper, the weight of betrayal sinking deep. The crowd buzzed with murmurings, their shocked faces shifting from Richard to David, confusion painting the air thick. David stepped forward, swaggering like he owned the place. "I've been around. You thought you could just erase me? But you can't get rid of your past, Richard." He gestured dramatically, as if playing the role of the villain in a twisted play. Emma stood frozen, eyes darting between the two men, like a deer caught in headlights. "Daddy?" she murmured, innocence lacing the word with desperation. "No, Emma, don't," Richard started, but it was too late. David grinned. "Isn't it ironic, brother? You're out here playing the protector while you have no idea what's really at stake." The weight of his words smashed into Richard like a train. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" David rolled his eyes. "You're sitting on a gold mine and don't even know it. Little Emma is far more than you think she is. She's a piece in a game you can't even comprehend." Richard's heart thundered in his chest. "A game? What game?" Suddenly, David pulled out a small device from his pocket. "See this?" He held it high, the screen lighting up. "This is a list of names, powerful people who will do anything to possess what she holds. You've been playing with fire, Richard." The crowd gasped collectively. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Richard fought to process it, his mind racing. Emma, a pawn in a deadly game. What do you mean?" But before David could answer, the chaos escalated again. Flashes of red and blue lights bounced off nearby buildings as police swarmed the area. The sirens blared, clashing with the chaos. "Everyone, clear out!" came a booming voice through the megaphone. "Damn it!" David cursed, sensing the shift in air. He shot Richard a piercing glance. "We need to talk. Not here." Richard took a step back, gripping Emma tightly. "You're not taking her anywhere." A sudden explosion erupted from behind them, sending debris flying. Screams erupted into the night, and Richard felt himself thrown against the ground, Emma beneath him. He shielded her, heart racing like a drum. "Stop!" the police shouted again, struggling to contain the chaos. But as the dust settled, it was David's next words that crumbled Richard's world. "They know, Richard. They've known for years. You're not the only one who lost something that night. Emma isn't just my niece. She's the last connection to something bigger than you can imagine." "What?" Richard's mind spun, grasping for stability. "What are you talking about?" David stepped forward, ready to spill yet another bombshell. "She's not just a girl, Richard. She's the key to everything. And now they'll stop at nothing to get her." At that moment, a shot rang out, sending everyone into a frenzy. The bullet struck David square in the chest, and he gasped, eyes wide with shock. He stumbled back, collapsing to the ground. "No!" Richard screamed, heart racing. But as the crowd gasped and chaos rippled outwards, something changed inside Richard. Anger surged at the sight of his brother's body falling. Who was shooting? What was happening? Suddenly, police officers charged forward, securing the scene, but it was too late. Richard knelt beside David, horror drowning his heart. "What have I done?" But as David's eyes dimmed, he gasped out two final words: "The truth." Then, silence. Richard looked around, panic clawing at him. This was far from over. What truth? What had he just stepped into? Everything spiraled. His family, Emma, the secrets buried deep. And in the chaos, one question rang clear. Who was really pulling the strings? Richard knelt beside David's body, reality crashing down like a wave. The crowd froze, the chaos around them a mere background to his spiraling thoughts. Emma trembled next to him, eyes wide with confusion, and Richard's heart twisted in agony. In that moment, David's last words echoed in his mind. The truth. He looked around, desperation gnawing at him. The shock in the crowd was palpable. "Get Emma out of here," a police officer shouted, rushing toward them, sirens wailing in the distance. Richard turned to Jason, whose face mirrored his own disbelief. "We need to move!" But before they could react, Clara's voice cut through the tension. "We need to protect her! They'll come for Emma! They'll use her!" "What do you mean?" Richard shouted, panic flooding his veins. "She's just a child." "No, she's not," Clara replied, eyes blazing. "She's the legacy of everything, the bloodline they want to control. You never understood what our lives were entangled in, Richard." Before he could answer, the ground shook again. More gunfire sparked in the distance, shattering the sudden peace as someone shouted for backup. Richard grabbed Emma's hand, urgency flooding through him. "We have to go! Now!" He pulled Emma close, heart racing as the chaos resumed. The crowd began to scatter, excitement turning to fear. They moved deeper into the night, the screams fading behind them. The weight of David's body loomed large in Richard's mind. As they turned a corner, out of sight, Richard caught his breath. The three of them, Richard, Emma, and Jason, stood together, a fragile unit amid the storm. "Where do we go?" Emma's voice trembled. "Anywhere that's not here," Richard replied, glancing over his shoulder. He was scared, but he tried to project strength. "Just stick close to us." But Jason pulled Richard aside, urgency igniting in his gaze. "We need to tell her the truth. She deserves to know what's happening." "Now?" Richard hissed, glancing at Emma, her innocent eyes filled with unshed tears. "She's just a kid, Jason. And if we don't tell her, what'll happen when it all comes crashing down?" "We're already in way over our heads." Richard swallowed hard, the lump in his throat mixing with the pounding of his heart. "Okay, but we have to be careful. We can't let her feel the weight of this yet." They regrouped, hearts in sync for a moment, bonded by this new decision. Richard knelt to Emma's level. "Emma, there's something we need to talk about. You're very special, and there are people who want to use that." "Use me?" she echoed, eyes glistening with confusion. "They want to control what you are, who you are," Jason said gently, kneeling next to her. "But you're not alone. We will protect you, no matter what." With that, Richard felt a spark of hope ignite. They were determined to fight, but a deep part of him ached at the thought of the dangers lurking in the shadows, waiting. Suddenly, a vehicle screeched to a halt nearby, engines revving. More figures started to spill into view, looks of determination marking their faces. The game was far from over. "Stay behind me," Richard said fiercely, ready to defend Emma with every fiber of his being. He could feel the madness of their world growing heavier, like storm clouds ready to drop. "This isn't ending here," Jason asserted. "We need to find a way to expose the truth, once and for all." Richard nodded, determination surging through him. No more waiting. No more lies. As they prepared to face what lay ahead, a profound sense of clarity washed over Richard. The path was fraught with danger, but they had each other. "Together," he said softly, glancing at Emma, then at Jason. "We'll face this together." But just as they turned to step forward, the ground shook again, and a faint echo of laughter rang through the air. Who was truly pulling the strings? As they stood together, shadows looming, Richard realized this battle was only beginning. Now's the time for you to jump into action. You must subscribe to the channel immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive story. Click that like button now to help the algorithm and keep the adventures alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait another second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this ending. True fans know the impact of your support matters more than ever.